Hello again, and welcome to another of Mosaic's coffee breaks. Mosaic is, of course, a collaboration of the organisations shown at the front of this presentation, and that collaboration focuses very much on the ownership issues associated with mid-market law firms. And when we say ownership, we mean everything associated with ownership, mergers and acquisitions, partnership structures, succession planning, partner exits, and everything associated with all of those issues. I hope you enjoy this broadcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second webcast by Mosaic in our series of webcasts looking at the anatomy of the deal. In episode 1, Mark covered issues that arise out of due diligence, and in today's episode 2, Howard's going to be talking about valuation issues. Without further ado, Howard, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all or good morning to all our viewers. Valuation is obviously a key issue when doing a deal, and we all know the difficulties in getting to the bottom line of a valuation. And what I'm looking at here now is once you've agreed a valuation and put that into your heads of terms, your HOTs, what happens between then and actual completion date. I think there are 3 areas that I would particularly like to pick up on in terms of where I've seen things have gone wrong between HOT and completion date, and where frankly the deal has been aborted as a result of those issues. And it comes down to the fine detail, and it's the fine detail of what you're going to receive post-deal. And to my mind, there are 3 areas which really have to be looked at very carefully. When you do a deal, you usually do either a deal that's based on completion accounts at the date of the completion, or based on what's called a lockbox arrangement. Now, both of those arrangements need detailed terms in the sale and purchase agreement, share purchase agreement, detailed terms as to how you define the completion accounts, or how you define define how you get to the locked box arrangement. If you start getting to the stage where you're spending an awful lot of time negotiating the detailed terms of those 2 areas, then it starts to show that the degree of trust that you need in a deal is not going to necessarily be there, nor once you've done the deal, that you're actually going to have agreement post the deal to what proceeds you're going to receive. So you get the feeling of how easy it's going to be post-deal to actually get your money. And if you're perceiving all sorts of ifs and buts, that can often be a reason to walk away. The other area, looking at that detailed area, is the valuation of work in progress. That's perhaps the most difficult area. And many deals are based on collections received after the date of a deal. Now, that sounds fair and reasonable on the face of it, but you've then got to start apportioning the amount of work done on work in progress before and after completion date. That needs to go into the SPA in some detail. And again, if you start having difficulties in defining what your completion proceeds are going to be and how you value your work in progress, that again can be a reason to actually walk away from the deal. So those are the 2/3 areas that I really concentrate on when advising clients whether to proceed or not.
Yeah, and certainly, as someone who drafts the SPAs and APAs, we do get into a lot of detail, working very closely with Howard, Tom, other accountants are available to draft that. How do you value WIP? When's it going to be paid? What happens to all the, I've got one on at the moment where we've got about half a dozen different ways of valuing WIP for different types of WIP on what the work is. So yeah, a lot of work can go into this. And when people realize that they're not, if the seller realizes they're not going to get as much as they thought they would, that's when the problems arise.
Absolutely. And my rule of thumb, and I don't know if Tom or the rest of you have got any views on this, if your negotiation between heads of terms and completion is going to take more than 3 months, that's an indication that there's a problem, and you probably should start thinking of walking away from the deal.
I once had one that got to 17 versions of the heads of terms. And I know Nigel's talking about culture on one of the future topics here, but culture, you cannot work with these people if they can't agree heads of terms.
You might have to tell me more about that one for me to feature it in my talk. 17. Good
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah.
Tom, what's your rule of thumb for length of time?
No, I don't know if I have a rule of thumb per se, but I was going to ask you, Howard, about the sort of the clever advisor here needs to avoid these scenarios, right? We don't want 17 versions. We can maybe cope with 2, but 17 is clearly a problem.
Yeah.
So
I'll accept 3.
Okay, well, there you are, very generous of you. So I suppose my question comes, how do you try and bring some of those negotiations forward, some of those conversations earlier? Because to sort of, for the uneducated, what you were explaining brilliantly earlier is this idea that we can discuss a headline number of valuation, but actually the sort of the payment terms, the mechanisms of payment, the formulae that might sit around working capital, which is what you were describing earlier, is actually a completely separate negotiation. And so we might all agree that it's worth £1 million, but actually net of stuff, I might only actually be paying you 800,000 or 900,000. It's no longer the £1 million that you thought it was. And if that comes out the woodwork at the end, that's where sellers tend to go, but where's my £1 million gone?
Yeah.
So how do you try and
avoid that? Well, I would say, and Mark is going to love me with this, don't let the lawyers get involved in the negotiation. Only let the lawyers get involved once the lead advisors, usually the accountants, have bottomed as much of the definitions as possible, and then give it to the lawyers to firm up on the precise wordings. There are an awful lot of lawyers who are frustrated corporate financiers who think they should be doing the deal rather than the accountants. That certainly doesn't apply to the 2 lawyers on this call, but try to resist restrict the extent to which the lawyers get involved in the actual negotiation.
Well, I'll spare Mark's blushes, Howard, by just commenting that's #controversial there.
That's right. I just remind Howard that when I did my MBA, I beat all the accountants in the finance exam. I think that's right. But it's also explaining to the seller what debt-free, cash-free actually means. Picking up on Tom's point, oh, I'm going to get £1 million. Well, you're not. That's the valuation. But you've got these debts. There's WIP. There's prepayments, accruals. There's all sorts of other technical stuff. So the lead advisor needs to be clear to the seller what they're actually going to get.
I think that's certainly some of it, Mark. I know I will spare Howard's blushes and say I have seen him on transactions use little worked examples and little sort of, if we were doing it today, it would spit out X pounds. And look, X pounds is less than the valuation that we agreed 3 months ago. And carrying on this theme, we're not doing the deal today. We're doing it at whatever the completion day is. So X is less than what we agreed, but X also isn't the right answer. And it will be what it will be is sometimes quite a powerful tool. But equally, I know, Howard, and maybe you are a better man than I am in this conversation, you then still have to educate the seller in the way that Mark has described. And certainly if you start then saying, not only are you not getting X pounds, you're getting X minus whatever working capital, you've then got to pay the tax man. So we're now X pounds minus working capital minus tax equals some number much smaller than you thought we'd started.
Which is where you and I
on the round the world cruise.
Which I think you and I, Tom, when asked what a law firm is worth, our normal phraseology is not as much as you like or you would expect.
Yes, I was going to say, if you hadn't said that, Howard, precisely brings us back to Mosaic first principles, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think that was a very useful discourse on valuation issues. So thank you very much for leading us on that, Howard, and thank you, of course, to Mark and Tom for your contributions. we hope this has been informative for all our viewers, and episode 3, which will either be on accounts or on cultural issues, we'll make our minds up fairly soon. That will follow in a week or so. Until then, take care.